Good morning. It's Tacoma Manning here, and I wanted to read a little bit from one of my new book releases, Satan Unmasked, and I'm reading from chapter 4. It's called Principalities and Powers. I once knew a lady who blamed everything rotten in her life on Satan. I witnessed her scream at her car with over 200,000 miles on it, "Satan, take your filthy hands off my car." She would take her fist and pound on the dashboard repeatedly when the clutch would slip. Perhaps the car was just worn out and owed for many years of service. Not only did this woman believe Satan attacked her car, but also any appliance that refused to work and anything that seemed to bring her annoyance. If the line were too long at the store, or if she forgot her PIN to her bank card, she would scream, "Satan, take your filthy hands off my mind. Satan, you must bow under my authority." I wondered how long he would stay about at her command. This disturbing behavior also seemed to be present among her close circle of friends. They were forever binding demons, pleading the blood, or talking to the enemy. On more than one occasion, I overheard the names of different demons sent by the adversary to destroy these friends and sabotage their day. A stranger would have thought that they were close to being imprisoned like the Apostle Paul, to be put under such attacks, and yet Paul never told Satan to take his filthy paws off him, not even once. Is everything that goes wrong in our lives due to Satan? Hasatan is usually translated as the accuser or the adversary. Paul translates in English as the, and is used as a title given to a being versus the name of a being. For instance, the baker is a title of a man or woman who bakes bread, but that is not the baker's name. The mechanic is a title given to a person who works on cars, but that is not the mechanic's name. What do we wrestle against? Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." This scripture has been used as an example of a spiritual hierarchy of demons. The word principality shows rulership. Titus 3:1 says, "Put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work." But principalities and powers are not always demons, but could be our government leaders. We must first ask ourselves what the apostles were wrestling with at that time concerning leaders. Acts 12:1 and 2 says, "Now about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church to mistreat them, and he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword." This Herod was not the same Herod that beheaded John the Baptist. That Herod was Herod Agrippa. There was another Herod at the time of the birth of Messiah who slew all the baby boys under the age of 2 in Bethlehem. This Herod was hoping to slaughter the Messiah. Countless verses explain why these powers and rulers of darkness were men that could not and would not stand for the kingdom of heaven taking over their kingdoms. Acts 17 is a prime example. Lonnie Lane, teacher, author, and speaker, gives us a broader perspective into this teaching on principalities by explaining what kind of assembly the apostles were starting in her article, "Church Isn't in the New Testament." Paul and Silas were accused of turning the world system upside down. What was their message that made them worthy of such a declaration? Paul came to town and began proclaiming Yeshua in the temple. Here's what then took place. Becoming jealous and taking along some wicked men from the marketplace, some formed a mob and set the city in an uproar, attacking the house of Jason. They were seeking to bring them out to the people. When they did not find them, they began dragging Jason and some brethren from the city authorities shouting, "These men who have upset the world have come here also." What was the message that was so inflaming? The accusation is found in the next verse, verse 7. And Jason has welcomed them, and they all act contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Yeshua. They weren't telling the people to start a church, find a building and minister, attend every weekend and act like good Christians. That wouldn't have incited the city fathers against them. No, they were announcing another king other than Caesar. They were calling people out of the Roman system into another kingdom, God's kingdom. A kingdom far more powerful than Caesar's. An entirely alternative life and allegiance. A whole new identity and way of life. These would now be people who no longer look to Caesar as their king. They would have been seen, this would have been seen as a declaration of war, of treason, such as the way of the called out one. Lane explains that Paul and Silas' words were freeing the people from the mental holds of the aristocrats in positions of high places, principalities and rulers in high places. Rethink what you've been taught about Satan. The people were taught that Rome was the exalted government and Caesar was a god along with all the Roman and Greek gods. The message of Paul and Silas was freeing them from bondage and chains. They too could be part of a kingdom, an everlasting kingdom of Messiah Yeshua, the called out ones. We have spiritual wickedness in high places in multiple nations today. Paul was more than likely referring to the powers that be and the very ones who had thrown him in a prison cell where he wrote these words from Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. If you'd like to get a copy of Satan Unmasked, you can get that at my website, TacoaManny.com. You can get it on Amazon. It's in Kindle, audio, and paperback. And I pray this has blessed you and opened your mind to think differently about Satan, because, guys, we've been taught a lot of things about this fallen angel that some refer to him as that are just not correct. Blessings. Bye-bye.